All right, let's do it.
It's a good time to fade out. Good song. Fade out.
All righty. Welcome, everybody. Very excited to begin here as we embark on Planet Green Show, Planet Green Change. Episode number 414, our remote broadcast from the one and only Grow Green of Michigan. We are in the brain center of that fine organization and all it does for our Michigan community. And we are going to broadcast in here live. As I say, we do our first of hopefully many on the road live broadcasts. And we have many of the same, we like to call the community entertainment, who's going to keep us involved here as we go through our very organized shell that we're going to work within. But let me begin, as we like to, with the introduction. And I will start with, to my immediate right, out of order from the norm, but he's our news guy and well-known throughout the state as Big Daddy. Please welcome Rick Thompson.
Only my real friends call me Big Daddy. You know what I mean.
That's right. And as it goes, just by going around the table here, he's known well in Michigan as the person responsible for everything.
At least everything, yeah.
And more.
Jamie Lowell.
Hello.
All right. And as we swing it around to the other side there, usually we're on the board. Although we should really recognize, seriously, stop for a second, because he's usually like undercover and I like to call him Tommy Two-Tone, but Tommy, behind the scenes over there, put all this together.
Great job.
Organized it.
Excellent.
Through,
Outstanding
like
setup.
without blinking an eye, just,
Right in his element.
took a picture and bam, there we are, on the road. He is not for hire. He's just ours. He's ours, nobody else's. He's got his own gig. He's not sharing.
No, never.
Someone that's very happy about Tommy, because he used to run the board and take all responsibilities for the technical at some point, but he is the founder of Michigan Parents for Compassion, the one and only Jim Powers.
Jimmy.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here. And as always, fuck Bill Shitty.
All right. We should mention Deb Young, usually here, is not here. Did she get her
She's at
absence?
the Adam Sandler concert tonight.
And she concurs about Bill Schuette.
She would also.
That's fine. I just want to make sure someone stamped her excuse, but maybe not. Moving around, we have the one and only Honeymaster, reformed police officer, and my dear friend and master of all trades at Comorn Law, Pooh Bear Esteban Steve Miller.
Hello, and great to be here. Thanks to Tony and Grow Green for having us out. Yeah. Very nice. And again, kudos to Tommy and his crew, Ashley, over there. Set this thing up, and it looks fantastic in here. It really does, if you get a chance to watch it.
So that's Pooh Bear as in Winnie, not Pooh Bear as in scatological poo, right? Because that would be a terrible name to call another friend,
Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh.
The lover of honey,
Bear.
kind of.
Not,
Pooh.
not
Pooh
a
Bear.
scat freak, but if that's what you're asking.
That's what you say now.
It's always big.
That's what he's implying. Yeah.
As these shows grow longer, the topics get weirder, and we find out more about Steve.
Big Daddy's always got a ticket there. I see in the corner of my eye over there, because we would not be in the county that we were in if he was not around. He's the kind of cowboy-esque tonight over there. Dewey. Yeah. Dewey is here. Welcome, Dewey, out there in the audience. Here.
Dewey! As Mike always says, everybody needs a Dewey.
That's right.
Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
The champion of Grow Green himself, the birther of it, we should say, right? Tony is here. We want to give a big, huge thanks to him and all of hospitality here.
Yay!
And moving around the room, we have Mad Max.
Mad Max, the dab master.
Mm-hmm.
What up?
Maybe.
Champion of...
Maybe.
And of course, everybody needs in our crew a Federalist. Although we do have a
Debatable.
list going around for those that want to join the Anti-Federalist Party, which will be forming tonight later after the show. We do have our Federalist Nihilist friend and attorney Schuyler Engels here.
Hello.
Nihilist.
And of course, the master of disaster, the iguana lover, guitar specialist, internationally renowned attorney, my good friend, took his cowboy hat off, Jeff Frazier.
Buenas noches, Michael. It's
Performing
great to be
tonight.
here.
Yes. So, let's see if I followed things so far. We introduced everybody. We talked about it in a remote location. And we're going to tease the topics right now. This is on the list here. The topics for tonight are going to be the State of the Union in Michigan with marijuana. I don't know who wrote that, but something like that.
State.
Gives a lot of different. Coming out of the closet, being a marijuana user. This is a topic that.
We had discussion on this the other day, you, Jeff, and I.
Right. Part of the principle of what we're trying to do with the live is just help push forward the idea that adult recreational cannabis use is something that it's time to start accepting and adopting it and become a norm and
You have to
regular
continue
part of.
teasing the topic.
All right, okay. The number 3 is the smoke club concept, which winds into, I guess, maintaining your patient status, and some of the show topics. I guess we're just going to talk about Rick Thompson. I don't know. I guess he could be sitting right next. We're just going to
Always
talk about him. I don't know if he's allowed to talk while we talk
gonna
about
do
him.
his
And
first
Alan
news.
Peisner, a lot to say about him too. Oh, that's
Does this
right.
mean that
Okay.
there's news about Alan Peisner that Rick's going to report
It is a little bit ambiguous. I think it could be interpreted a number of different ways.
Looks like
He's
if
not
I
here, so we're
didn't
gonna
show
talk
up,
about him.
Alan would be the default news guy, is what it looks like. But I'm here.
Oh, I see.
He contributes like court
Maybe
news and stuff
Alan
like
will call
that.
in with
That's
some
true. Maybe Alan will
Alan's supposed
update
to be
our
here, by the
appellate.
way. I don't know why he is not. Okay, so I guess now I get to I'm going to rant for a second. Is that what's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Which there's a lot of topics, of course, and
Have a schedule.
I think we've got a couple ideas of what we want to talk about the State of the Union of Michigan with marijuana, but I do have a reason to kind of rant a little bit. As many of you know, with the driving force of Mr. Big Ideas Man over here, we have sued the pharmacy board demanding that they do their government duty and unschedule cannabis. And we set that forth in a complaint, and we have served the appropriate parties, and we are waiting on a response and an answer. In the meantime, there's been some press about it, and we did a announcement originally when it happened with John Sinclair, who's the plaintiff, and there's a whole significant fact about his presence in the lawsuit and his case from early 1970s, which declared treating marijuana like a narcotic is unconstitutional. It's still good law in Michigan. But as we began to explain the reasons why this is still important and not just ceremonial, we set forth different reasons, explained it to who asked those questions, and the reasons are significant. I mean, putting aside the inherent conflict of the state of Michigan and its passing the MMFLA, the licensing for medical marijuana facilities, signing into law Prop 1, which allows the use of marijuana similar to alcohol. The idea that it remains a Schedule 1 is absurd. And all these laws that have been passed and made part of our legal system have displaced marijuana's placement as a controlled substance. That's our argument. And
It's a pretty good argument.
So,
And can I just say that Jeff's a little bit of a troublemaker?
International troublemaker, actually.
so I do want to look at this guy. So the rant starts with this guy, Kyle Kaminsky, who is from the Lansing City Pulse, who will say, we're a pretty progressive magazine, so not much to worry about. I joked with him beforehand, don't don't quote John Sinclair's swearing. He's like, oh, we're, or at least don't make him sound like, and of course they got him in here swearing. He's like, oh, don't worry about it, we blah, blah, blah. And he went through this with me, and he does a pretty good job reflecting on the comments and the ridiculousness of why it can't be scheduled and the reasons why. And then there's some confusion here, and this is really part of the rant, which is that, I'd say the continued placement on the public health code defines marijuana as a narcotic or some type of dangerous substance completely contradicts the regulatory system that allows for medical marijuana. It's not a dangerous substance, it needs to be removed from the list immediately. They go on to quote me as saying, Comorn, however, couldn't offer a single example of an unlawful search and seizure since the passage of Proposal 1. Sinclair also recognized the lawsuit could be symbolic gesture, more of a symbolic gesture, than a mechanism of meaningful change. So I take issue with that, because when he asked me, is this just a symbolic gesture, and are there any raids? I said, well, maybe there aren't any raids, but there's still pending cases. How could we be treating marijuana as, and being punished and criminalized under the public health code if it's still Schedule 1? I mean, this is still going on. So and there are raids that are taking place. But many police departments, I could tell you one that happened in Detroit, still taking place. But putting that aside, I want to get to the real problems that still exist with marijuana still being listed as Schedule 1. And I point to this incident, rather tragic. There's no winners in this. I argue this from a policy position and to make my case of why and the problems of marijuana still being Schedule 1. It's an unfortunate situation. This young girl, I think 21 years old, Blair Beck, 21 years old. No, I'm sorry. Blair Beck, 20, was killed in a crash by a 20-year-old driver, Logan Turner. She was convicted of the crime at trial, and she was sentenced 70 months in prison to 180 months, which is 6 years. And there's no prior record, and there was no evidence of a causation or correlation of the marijuana that was in her system that caused the accident. In fact, there was no observations of her being impaired. She had the blood results were apparently 5 nanograms of THC in her system. Now, the reason why a judge could potentially do this, and there's no question that this judge made an example of this young girl. She's 20 years old. She didn't get in a car drunk and drove, killed somebody. That's not what happened. She didn't use poor judge. And the idea that if she did have 5 nanograms, it tells you that it was not at a time that was immediately after she'd ingested it. It's a very common number if you look at the data as to a blood test for a patient or someone that uses marijuana recreationally. But it's certainly not a number that's ever been identified as a per se number with any study supporting it that causes impairment. Even the federal government studies. Now, I know Colorado has a 5 nanogram that makes it impaired driving, but that's just a law that they made. It doesn't mean that there's evidence to support it. But the point I want to make is that this woman was convicted of the crime of driving a vehicle with a controlled Schedule 1 substance in her blood, causing death. It was not about marijuana. It was about that marijuana Schedule 1, the Schedule 1 categorization is what puts her in the category of being subject to, as if she was driving heroin, LSD, or what have you. And there being no requirement whatsoever of actual impairment. This is a conviction you have it in your blood, zero tolerance, it's Schedule 1. The vehicle that you're driving was involved in an accident that resulted in a death. That's it. Do you understand? It may not have been her fault, but the accident caused death. Could it be nobody's fault? Do you understand? It falls, so when I say that there's potential significance on the value and, is this just is this just a ceremonial or trophy lawsuit? No. As it remains in the Public Health Code as a Schedule I, there are severe penalties associated with it. I mean, it doesn't even include the impact of it as dangerously defined for purposes of child protective services. I mean,
I think there's going to be some significant things come out of this lawsuit, is what I think. I think it's like pretty profound, like it's a pretty heavy thing to me to think that I was part of it and served it and everything, because I think it's going to be something big, is my feelings. It's going to set the tone for changes all the way up to a federal level, I believe. I think this thing is...
Really allows Dana Nessel to shine, because her interpretation of what the law is and how schedule is interpreted, I think will really have a big difference in how it gets done.
The whole country is watching the state of Michigan.
And then, by way of comparison on this, I had a case back when I was a detective. Girl about the same age, she was 19. Hit and run, hit a pedestrian crossing one of the main roads in Canton, and sent this pedestrian flying out of his shoes, one of those deaths. And pedestrian was drunk. We had good reason to believe the driver of the car was drunk. However, it was a hit and run, they split. I got called in, investigated at the scene, and while I was there, into the next morning, got a tip, went and found this girl, found the suspect hit and run driver. This girl was given, she ended up pleading guilty to I think 2-year misdemeanor negligent homicide, because it's too far beyond to determine alcohol level or impairment due to the hit and run, but she still had to leaving the scene of an accident causing death. Yeah. Pled to a 2-year neg hom.
Probation.
No, she did 9 months in the county jail. Was sentenced to 9 months in the county jail and some probation on top of that, I believe. So, not too far of a different case. I mean, but you're dealing with
county
alcohol,
jail,
hit and run, leaving the scene.
First of all, a sentence,
and then this girl,
a sentence to the county jail
an example.
versus being sent to 6 years in prison.
Yes. Yep.
The difference of those two existences,
Huge.
I mean, can't be. And I'm not. Listen, I do not want to come off as being unsympathetic to the terrible death that happened.
Exactly.
I mean, but
but if you compare this, I see that as a similar.
Well, if the judge is going to make an example out of it, there should be more support for
Yes.
cannabis being at fault or included in the issue before doing that.
And saying you're making an example absolutely says it's a prejudicial punishment that's being laid out.
Well,
Dictated not necessarily by the circumstance, but by the judge's own desire to make a public statement, and I think that's unfair
But
justice.
circle back around, and what Michael was saying, it's all about it being a Schedule I controlled substance.
Michael, you want to get a word in edgewise here, man?
So,
No,
this
you're right.
lawsuit has the ability to change all that, right here, out of this little office.
Well, let's talk about some of the other things that I think are really problematic with this case and the driving issue, because I think that this is a topic that we will be talking about in the next coming weeks, because I understand that the pilot program has officially come to a conclusion, and that there will be recommendations made from a committee or gathering of a group of some kind that will submit that to the
I'm sure science will be
legislature,
considered.
which I would say would suggest that a conviction for any presence should be questionable when the legislature is doing an open investigation to determine what levels are culpable for criminal behavior.
They don't know.
But she
They
gets
don't know.
sentenced to 6 years in prison when tomorrow or next week they're going to come up with a recommendation and it could be 6 nanograms.
Well, the judge hates
Right.
marijuana. I mean,
I'm just saying, can I just point out that these two things are existing in the same world right now? We have a zero tolerance law. This girl was convicted of, treated like it's a Schedule I, which it shouldn't be. And we're investigating whether or not, or if a number should exist at all.
How's that bullshit gonna work when everybody's body's not the same?
Well, that's even besides the point, right? The answer
is there is no number.
The answer is that there is no number, as Jamie points out. We've been down this path before.
They're going to give you a number.
I just want to say that I didn't smoke cannabis for 3 months and still tested for 5 nanograms.
Yeah.
THC or carboxyl?
THC.
Well, you're a unique person. Let's just be honest.
It's in your blood.
Most of us have blood in our veins.
Dab Master Max.
I'm just saying that's, you know.
He could have been smoking his hair. That works like it stays in your hair and it kind of got recycled.
I'm just saying, like, put me in this situation, me still testing positive, 5 nanograms, not consuming cannabis for 3 months. Like,
I mean, it's.
Well, you kill somebody.
Well, listen, for that purpose, a patient's card is the only salvation.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the things on
That's on the list.
agenda list. But if there was a.
That's short-lived, and we all know it. Because you guys are going to sue the shit out of somebody. Or something's going to get appealed, and they're going to have to find in our favor. It is.
What do you mean? Somebody's going to. Who's going to sue what about what?
We're not supposed to be subject to penalty for any use if you're over 21. That's the whole point. And this.
You're talking legalization, not medical.
Right.
I understand. Okay.
And I think that someone's going to go to jail for it, and they're going to say the obvious thing, which is, I wasn't intoxicated.
Her case could and should be that, right?
That's what I'm saying.
In fact, her case was charged with the law being as it is, and then Prop 1 came out, I think, while the case was going on, like in that November period, and actually changed. So,
But they will set a limit. That's the other side of that coin.
will they set a limit? Let's vote on it right now.
They will set
Who thinks there's not what? Let's say what we think they should do, and what
they should do.
what they should do, or what you think they're going to do. That's it. Jim, why don't you go first?
What they should do is have to prove there was A, bad driving.
Yes.
And then B, that there was some level of THC in your bloodstream that significantly impaired your ability to operate a vehicle in a safe manner. And not, you were over 5 nanograms. Because at the end of the day, if there's no bad driving, then you're not under the influence.
Right.
And the law speaks to not restricting the police from arresting you and you being charged for driving under the influence. And I believe it was worded that way for a very specific reason, and this is it. It's not meant to say there should be some arbitrary limit that means nothing. Now, if they can back it up with science, then let's have a discussion about it. But what is scary is that these politicians that we have been backing, and there's a whole ton of them, are all talking about this and are all talking really kindly about a per se limit and believe there should be one. And that should be scary.
Listen, here's a question. What do you think they should do? You kind of answered it. And what do you think they are going to do? Answer both or one of them again.
So first, they should have to prove, A, that you were driving badly. There was something bad or dangerous about your driving. And then B, that you were somehow impaired by some substance in your bloodstream. And there isn't a limit. You have to correlate the two. And if you can do that, you can prove to a jury that that person was under the influence of some substance and it impaired their ability to operate a vehicle and it manifested itself in bad driving. They should have to do all of that.
So you're saying they should get rid of the zero tolerance,
Yes.
that impairment, that any conviction for marijuana in the bloodstream would require proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the driver was impaired by marijuana and that their driving was directly affected by the marijuana they had in their system. That's what you're saying. What do you think they're going to do?
They're going to set a per se limit.
What do you think it's going to be?
Probably going to be something like 5 nanograms.
4 or 5 nanograms.
Steve Miller,
'cause
what do
that's
you say?
easy. It's easy for them.
What do you think they should do? What do you think they're going to do?
I think what they should do, and when I read an article just yesterday, when State Police Lieutenant Shaw was quoted as saying, we're going to continue to do what we've always done, and that's look for impairment. And if we see a car driving that looks like it's impaired, we're going to stop that car and we're going to investigate them for impairment and make a determination of what substance that impairment might be from. So that was right from the state police, and I think that's what they should do, look for the impairment. It doesn't make, there's no scientific backing for a level set for cannabis and driving. And number one, alcohol intoxicates, cannabis doesn't. And generally, I mean, I worked 20 years on it as a police officer, and I never came across a driver one time that was impaired by marijuana alone.
Okay.
I'm with what he was saying though, that it should have something to do with bad driving. Like if you're not at fault in the accident, or if you're not doing something outlandish, like why are you?
So if
regardless what it is,
if you get pulled over for a cracked windshield, you should not be able to escalate that situation into a cannabis impaired driving situation, because the reason they were pulled over had nothing to do with impaired or improper driving.
Right.
Here, listen to this first. So say you pull somebody over for cracked windshield. You go up to their car, you smell alcohol in the car or emanating from that person in that car. As an officer, now I have reason to
Have you
pull
get
them
out of the car
of
and do some field
and do
sobriety
an
tests, right?
alcohol
Right.
evaluations on
Right.
them. So cops are going to look at marijuana in much the same manner. So they're going to pull somebody over for a cracked
This is the
windshield.
point I wanted to make.
They are going
Steve.
to come up to the car, smell marijuana, and then pull people out of the car and do sobrieties and by whatever way they determine.
This is what I'm saying. The words that you spoke that seem to be somewhat peace of mind, I see as being code word for investigate. We pull them over for impairment. That means they pull them over for any reason.
Right.
And then once they get up to the car,
They're
if
gonna
they're
swab 'em.
suspicious of marijuana, they're going to investigate them with testing that is not established as being indicative of proving shit.
Right.
And they're going to investigate by requiring of them, as law does, to submit to a breath or blood test.
Yes.
If they think it's going to be something in your blood, you have to give blood, and then they're going to draw your blood.
Yes.
And that, as we stand here today, is a crime.
Yes.
No matter what. Your patient status as a card holder would impact that, of course, but
Right.
it's still something that they're probably going to prosecute if they're going to do that.
Right.
And the investigation problem, words investigate mean they're going to use the junk science of drug recognition experts. Now, this is the only alternative to a per se number. In fact, the best study, that most objective study, is AAA, that, sees every single crash report, knows what's in the bloodstream, people taken to the hospital, whatever the police reports say. They really don't have a fight in the game other than to increase insurance rates for people that use marijuana. And they said you can't come up with a number. It's too hard. There's too many variables and if you're going to do something, what you should do is invest in drug recognition experts. Now, I don't like this. This is junk science to me. But I would much rather have the ability to show how it does not really, or have a counter expert that these are not provable, than a jury being sold on the principle that 0.08, as the world knows, is drunk, right? So and let me tell you something. This is debatable, right? I mean, but most of the community has been propaganda to understand that 0.08 is a number. You hear 0.27, people think you're, drunk off your ass. But the point is that it's a good tool of how the police have gotten this safety concern out. The same thing can happen, and this is my concern, with a per se number.
All right.
My concern with the per se number is it's bullshit. I mean, I think I speak for Jamie there, that it's just bullshit.
I feel spoken for.
In closing, as we keep in
Mrs.
track here,
Jamie might have
the
spoken
Ingham
for him
County
earlier.
Sheriff, in response to my demands to unschedule, said, listing in the Public Health Code has no bearing on any actual enforcement efforts from a police standpoint. Just totally disagree with what I said. He then goes on to say, the presence of marijuana, accordingly, is no longer a mechanism that can be used for searches and seizures. He emphasized. Now, this, of course, is in Ingham County. We know that the Ingham County prosecutor is the only prosecutor in the state that supported Prop 1. So maybe this is, I mean, it would seem as if he's in a bubble. If I knew that every other sheriff signed off on this, maybe.
If there's a
Still got the
direction
public
from the
driving.
Michigan State Police that said that, in one of those Michigan State Police bulletins, that would be ideal.
Yeah, it's not, he didn't point anyone to that. But anyways, it's a good way to leave. So Ingham County's got it somewhat right now. But
The Rant.
I would say this, that conviction was in Ingham County.
Of course it was.
So what are they saying?
Yeah.
What are they saying?
Make an example of the potheads.
So the prosecutor and the judges are simply not on the same page.
I don't know how they
That's
were-
not a surprise.
I didn't mention that earlier. That's outrageous. Are we taking a break? What are we doing?
Yeah, we're taking a
All right, good.
break.
How'd that go so far, okay?
Very nice. Very nice.